Welcome back to Prophets of the Exile, Lamentations 3. Now, yesterday we looked at the United Kingdom under Saul, David, and Solomon, and then the divided kingdom where the northern 10 tribes were taken away into Assyria for their disobedience, never to be seen again, and the 2 southern tribes that we call Judah, which is right there at Jerusalem, were also chastised for their disobedience. But so far there's not been any type of deportation like what happened with the northern tribes by Assyria. But we know, having read Lamentations, that there is a catastrophe coming. So let's look at the backstory as it continues here through the divided kingdom, through the southern kingdom of Judah. Yesterday we left off with King Manasseh, who is Hezekiah's son, who is a very wicked king. He put other gods' shrines in the tabernacle. In the temple. He was bloody in terms of violence and a very wicked and evil king. And then 2 generations later, his son Josiah is born, and we have hope again because we find out that this is actually a good king, and something happens in his life that turns him back towards Yahweh, even though he'd grown up under a wicked grandfather. So let's look at that. It's in 2 Kings 22, and we're going to read for a while. But I think you need this backstory. It will help you really understand not only Lamentations, but going forward in your walk with the Lord, you'll understand more about his relationship with Israel and why he was so disappointed in them and why Jesus calls us to be obedient. So we're in 2 Kings chapter 22, verse 1. This is King Manasseh's grandson, Josiah. He's one of the last kings of Judah, one of the last kings of Israel. And so Josiah was 8 years old when he began to reign. He reigned 31 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Jedidiah, daughter of Adiah of Bosketh. He did what was right in the sight of Yahweh and walked in all the way of his father David. He did not turn aside to the right or to the left. In the 18th year of King Josiah, the king sent Shaphan, son of Azaliah, son of Meshullam, the secretary, to the house of Yahweh, saying, Go up to the high priest Hilkiah, and have him count the entire sum of the money that has been brought into the house of Yahweh, which the keepers of the threshold have collected from the people. Let it be given into the hand of the workers who have the oversight of the house of Yahweh. Let them give it to the workers who are at the house of Yahweh, repairing the house, that is, to the carpenters, to the builders, to the masons, and let them use it to buy timber and quarried stone to repair the house. But no accounting shall be asked from them for the money that is delivered into their hand, for they deal honestly. The high priest Hilkiah said to Shaphan the secretary, I have found the book of the law in the house of Yahweh. When Hilkiah gave the book to Shaphan, he read it. Then Shaphan the secretary came to the king and reported to the king, Your servants have emptied out the money that was found in the house, and have delivered it into the hand of the workers who have oversight of the house of Yahweh. Shaphan the secretary informed the king, The priest Hilkiah has given me a book. Shaphan then read it aloud to the king. When the king heard the words of the book of the law, he tore his clothes. Then the king commanded the priest Hilkiah, Ahikam, son of Shaphan, Achbor, son of Micaiah, Shaphan the secretary, and the king's servant Asaiah, saying, Go, inquire of Yahweh for me, for the people, and for all Judah, concerning the words of this book that have been found. For great is the wrath of Yahweh that is kindled against us, because our ancestors did not obey the words of this book, to do according to all that is written concerning us. So the priest Hilkiah, Ahikam, Achbor, Shaphan, and Asaiah went to the prophetess Huldah, the wife of Shallum, son of Tikvah, son of Harhas, keeper of the wardrobe. She resided in Jerusalem in the 2nd quarter, where they consulted her. She declared to them, Thus says Yahweh, the God of Israel, Tell the man who sent you to me, Thus says Yahweh, I will indeed bring disaster on this place and on its inhabitants, all the words of the book that the king of Judah has read, because they have abandoned me, and have made offerings to other gods, so that they have provoked me to anger with all the work of their hands. Therefore my wrath will be kindled against this place, and it will not be quenched. But as to the king of Judah, who sent you to inquire of Yahweh, thus you shall say to him, Thus says Yahweh, the God of Israel, regarding the words that you have heard, because your heart was penitent, and you humbled yourself before Yahweh, when you heard how I spoke against this place and against its inhabitants, that they should become a desolation and a curse, and because you have torn your clothes and wept before me, I also have heard you, says Yahweh. Therefore I will gather you to your ancestors, and you shall be gathered to your grave in peace. Your eyes shall not see all the disaster that I will bring on this place. They took the message back to the king. So to recap, chapter 22, we have gotten so far away from Yahweh and the law of Moses and the old covenant that was given to the people of Israel at Mount Sinai that they lost it. They lost the law. It was supposed to be in the Ark of the Covenant. Do you remember? In the tabernacle and then later in the temple. It was supposed to be right there in the Holy of Holies as Yahweh's footstool, where the law would be there before the people all the time. The Ten Commandments and the additional laws. So they would know that they were supposed to love God and love their neighbor as themselves. But they got so far away from that under King Manasseh and all the other wicked kings that they lost it. They didn't know where it was. It was gone. And so you see in chapter 22 here of 2 Kings that there was a reconstruction going on, just like you would renovate your house. They were renovating the temple. And they talk about the money that they're going to pay to the carpenters and the masons and all that. And while they are tearing down the old walls or putting up new walls, they find the book of the law. They find Moses' book. Isn't that amazing? It was hidden. It was gone. And no one missed it. And so Josiah, this young king, has never heard the law. And he reads it. He takes it and he reads it. And he is gripped with grief and conviction because he realizes what the prophets have said about Jerusalem and about the people of Israel. That if they're not obedient to Yahweh and his law, he's going to destroy the city that has his home in it. And he's so upset. He sends for word from Yahweh. And you see here a female prophetess. Her name is Huldah. And she goes to Yahweh and asks Yahweh what message she's supposed to give to the king. And Yahweh says, because you were repentant, King Josiah, I will not do this terrible destruction in your lifetime. And so you will die without seeing this wrath that's coming on your city. But he's not saying that I'm not going to do the wrath. He is going to execute justice on the injustice of the people of Israel. But he's going to delay because Josiah is a man after his own heart, in line with King David. And so that's where we leave off at 22, is Josiah's given a promise that he's not going to see it. There will be a delay. So then, chapter 23, the words of the law so impacted Josiah that he has to do something about them, just like I hope you have to do something about the words of the law when you read it too. So in chapter 23, verse 1, then the king directed that all the elders of Judah and Jerusalem should be gathered to him. The king went up to the house of Yahweh, and with him went all the people of Judah, all the inhabitants of Jerusalem, the priests, the prophets, and all the people, both small and great. He read in their hearing all the words of the book of the covenant that had been found in the house of Yahweh. The king stood by the pillar and made a covenant before Yahweh to follow Yahweh, keeping his commandments, his decrees, and his statutes, and with all his heart and all his soul to perform the words of this covenant that were written in this book. All the people joined in the covenant. Does that remind you of anything at Mount Sinai when people say, after Moses reads the law, they say, all that Yahweh says we will do and we will be obedient. So at this point, there's one mind and one heart in terms of the king and his leadership and the people. They say they want to follow Yahweh. The king commanded the high priest Hilkiah, the priests of the second order, and the guardians of the threshold to bring out of the temple of Yahweh all the vessels made for Baal, for Asherah, and for all the host of heaven. Now those are the other idols, the other gods. Their vessels were in Yahweh's temple. King Josiah burned them outside Jerusalem in the fields of the Kidron and carried their ashes to Bethel. He deposed the idolatrous priests whom the kings of Judah had ordained to make offerings in the high places at the cities of Judah and around Jerusalem, those also who made offerings to Baal, to the sun, to the moon, the constellations, and all the host of heaven. He brought out the image of Asherah from the house of Yahweh outside Jerusalem to the Wadi Kidron. He burned it at the Wadi Kidron, beat it to dust, and threw the dust of it upon the graves of the common people. Now this was another idol, a fertility goddess. He broke down the houses of the male temple prostitutes that were in the house of Yahweh. Can you believe that? Where the women did weaving for Asherah. He brought all the priests out of the towns of Judah and defiled the high places where the priests had made offerings. From Geba to Beersheba, he broke down the high places of the gates that were at the entrance of the gate of Joshua, the governor of the city, which were on the left at the gate of the city. The priests of the high places, however, did not come up to the altar of Yahweh in Jerusalem, but ate unleavened bread among their kindred. He defiled Topheth, which is in the valley of Ben Hinnom, so that no one would make a son or daughter pass through fire as an offering to Molech. Can you believe they were doing that? They were making child sacrifices to this other god named Molech, making them pass through the fire. He removed the horses that the kings of Judah had dedicated to the sun at the entrance to the house of Yahweh by the chamber of the eunuch Nathan Melech, which was in the precincts. Then he burned the chariots of the sun with fire. The altars on the roof of the upper chamber of Ahaz, which the kings of Judah had made, and the altars that Manasseh had made in the two courts of the house of Yahweh, he pulled down from there and broke in pieces and threw the rubble into the Wadi Kidron. Can you believe it? They had altars to other gods in the temple, in Yahweh's temple. I mean, I don't think people realized how bad it was. The king defiled the high places that were east of Jerusalem, to the south of the Mount of Destruction, which King Solomon of Israel had built for Astarte, the abomination of the Sidonians, for Shamash, the abomination of Moab, and for Milcom, the abomination of the Ammonites. Those are three gods of the local people: Milcom, Shamash, and Astarte. All right there in Yahweh's home. He broke the pillars in pieces, cut down the sacred poles, and covered the sites with human bones. Moreover, the altar at Bethel, the high place erected by Jeroboam, son of Nebat, who caused Israel to sin, he pulled down that altar along with the high place. That's where the two golden calves were. He burned the high place, crushing it to dust. He also burned the sacred pole. As Josiah turned, he saw the tombs there on the mount, and he sent and took the bones out of the tombs and burned them on the altar and defiled it, according to the word of Yahweh that the man of God proclaimed. When Jeroboam stood by the altar at the festival, he turned and looked up at the tomb of the man of God who had predicted these things. That would be one of the prophets. Then he said, "What is that monument that I see?" The people of the city told him, "It is the tomb of the man of God who came from Judah and predicted these things that you have done against the altar at Bethel." He said, "Let him rest. Let no one move his bones." So they let his bones alone, with the bones of the prophet who came out of Samaria. Moreover, Josiah removed all the shrines of the high places that were in the towns of Samaria, which kings of Israel had made, provoking Yahweh to anger. He did to them just as he had done at Bethel. He slaughtered on the altar all the priests of the high places who were there and burned human bones on them. Then he returned to Jerusalem. The king commanded all the people, "Keep the Passover of Yahweh your God, as prescribed in this book of the covenant." No such Passover had been kept since the days of the judges who judged Israel, even during all the days of the kings of Israel and of the kings of Judah. But in the 18th year of King Josiah, this Passover was kept to Yahweh in Jerusalem. Let that soak in for a minute. They got the word on the Passover when they were in Egypt. Remember, the angel of death came over the homes, and if there was blood on the lintel of the doorpost, then he passed over, and their children were saved, their boys were saved, their firstborn. And they were supposed to be keeping that Passover as an annual reminder, an annual ritual that Yahweh had delivered and saved them. And they hadn't kept it even since they got into the promised land and they had their first king, Saul. They hadn't been having a Passover for hundreds of years. Moreover, Josiah put away the mediums, wizards, teraphim, idols, and all the abominations that were seen in the land of Judah and in Jerusalem, so that he established the words of the law that were written in the book that the priest Hilkiah had found in the house of Yahweh. Before him there was no king like him, who turned to Yahweh with all his heart, with all his soul, and with all his might, according to all the law of Moses, nor did any like him arise after him. So Yahweh did not turn from the fierceness of his great wrath, by which his anger was kindled against Judah, because of all the provocations with which Manasseh had provoked him. Yahweh said, I will remove Judah also out of my sight, as I have removed Israel, and I will reject this city that I have chosen, Jerusalem, and the house of which I said, my name shall be there. And then the next thing that happens in this chapter is that King Josiah dies in battle, and you could read that if you want to. But so we have this good king who finds the law after hundreds of years, reads it and is convicted about it, reads it in front of all the people. He gathers all the people and he reads it to them. And of course, one of the things in that law is to keep Passover. So he institutes Passover again. And even though we've got this king who's repentant, it's not enough to save Jerusalem and Israel, because their transgressions are just too great. So King Josiah gets a break because he doesn't get to see the destruction. He doesn't grieve what the author of Lamentations grieves, but the people's hearts really were not changed. And we'll see that in the sons of King Josiah right before Babylon is conquered. And we're going to cover that tomorrow. So there's this idea of long-suffering, patience as a Christian gift. One of the gifts, one of the fruits of the Spirit is long suffering and patience. And Jesus, Yahweh, is so long suffering and patient with us. He gives us so many warnings. You saw in this passage, all the prophets were warning the kings, warning the priests. Got to get it together, need to be obedient. There will be consequences because Yahweh will let you go, and you will find out how bad it is when you are your own God. And so, we need to be quick to turn, quick to repent when He convicts us of a sin. When He shows you that you have an idol or you have another God on the throne, whether it's yourself or something else like your money or any of the things that have been stripped away recently in your life, He's showing you that for a reason. He's warning you because He wants you to turn and to love Him with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. So we're going to continue looking at Lamentations 3 now. And I want you to see something there that's really striking. It's different. I told you in the first video that Lamentations 3 is the climax. There's kind of a move to a climax point in Lamentations 3. And so in the next video, I'm going to go over that with you, okay? Talk to you then.